All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. My name is Adrienne Amandi. I'm the director of the Education Resource Center at the California School for the Blind. I'm really excited about today's Tuesday Tea. We have a student taking the lead. Very excited about the leadership that we saw from Ellie, who came to another Tuesday Tea and was put on the spot and asked if she would be interested in sharing herself and her perspective. And with no hesitation, she stepped up and said, absolutely. And I know that that came with planning and thinking and organization. And Ellie, I have a tremendous amount of respect for you. And Annalisa, as her current TVI, a lot of respect for you too, to bring this very important topic of self-advocacy to this group. Thank you. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Wonderful.
All right, I will go ahead and start to screen share our presentation here. Like I said, or like we were introduced, my name is Ellie, and I just showed up to a Tea Tuesday, and now we're here. I am spilling the tea on Tuesday. So my presentation today that I made with Annalisa is a really fun concept that I thought of. Because a lot of the time we as blind people, we're not always the stereotypical absolute blind person. We're in that spectrum. We're like the color wheel, So I wanted to show off my vision of the rainbow vision and how this will lead into our self-advocacy. All right, so going off of the baseline red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple color wheel, I'll tell you why we're just doing those 6 colors later. So we're gonna start off with our first color here, which is red. So these are our fully sighted people who have 20/20 vision without correction. And people often ask, how common is 20/20? And that's only about 30 to 35% of adults who don't need glasses, no contacts, and no corrective surgery. So what if you do maybe need glasses? Those are the people who are in our orange tier, and those are people with corrective lenses, which is about 75% of all adults. And like I said, that's contacts, glasses, and corrective surgery. But in my head, colorblind people also fall under this category, because while you can still have 20/20 vision with color blindness, generally people who have it are affected by not being able to see certain colors. All right, so TVIs, you're gonna get probably mad at this stage here. This color, yellow, these are our people. And Elisa's gonna yell at me too. These are the people maybe who use glasses, maybe their prescription isn't current or they don't need to use glasses. Or these are the people maybe their vision's not fully correctable, but sadly, this stage I'd like to call the cane shame stage, because maybe these are our blind babies who don't quite know what accommodations they need. Maybe they haven't spoken up yet, or they're scared to use their cane or their assistive technology. So once we finally build up the courage and the comfortability level, we're on to the green stage. So this is my personal color. So this is visual impairment or monocular vision. So I wrote down on the slide, that's most of us here, but I recognize our next color is most likely most of us here. So in my head, we're between the green and purple in this setting, but you'll see in a second what the other colors are. So this is a visual acuity of 20/60 or greater. And, we actively use our accommodations and our canes. Well, most of us here, but, we are striving to make things accessible, and we want to show off our example. Like I said, I have a visual impairment. I have astigmatism, or nystagmus and astigmatism, and optic nerve hyperplasia. So I would consider myself under this tier, but these colors are without like any underlying things like visual snow, reduced visual fields, because we're going to get into the different shades. Because, there's not just one shade of green. There's dark green, there's light green, there's dark purple, there's light blue, dark blue. So on to our next color, blue. These are the people who are legally blind or a visual acuity of 2200. These are people who have light perception still, shapes, colors, shadow, and many more things. Reduced visual fields maybe, and visual snow. And on to our last color here, absolute blindness, which is purple. So how many of us here know that only about 10 to 15% of blind people actually have absolute blindness? We can raise our hands or either. I don't mind.
I don't really know how to raise my hand, but I am completely blind.
Wow. So you're part of the 10, 15% club.
No, I can't see anything at all.
Wow. Yeah, so I'm guessing no light perception at all. So I wanted to ask, maybe you guys could put it in the chat, what color you think you fall under. And like I said, maybe I'm a nice foresty green, but I think my friend is a turquoise. So you can be like any shade of color, and I think this is a really fun concept, but of course I kind of feel bad for my colorblind friends, so I'm sorry that I'm bringing up color. But is there any chat? Oh, there is chats. I can see chats. Yeah, so I wanted, as I just went over our tiers here, I wanted to read to you Google's top 5 questions about blind people. And you guys are free to laugh here because it shows how silly it can be at times. So, do blind people see black? We don't see anything really. So, I mean, I guess you could measure that by black, but I don't know if I would count that. Next question, what do blind people see? I'm just gonna give that a slow blink. Yeah, exactly, thank you, Annalisa. She just did a slow blink for me too. So my third question here is, do blind people see in their dreams? We'll quickly move on. Why do blind people wear sunglasses? Guys, we're just trying to protect our retinas, and most of us are, light sensitive. I'm sure some of you guys are too. So, we're just trying to have healthy retinas, And last question, I'm sure this one comes from a very good place in their heart, is, can a blind person ever see again? Good question, but unless there's some cool surgery, I can't. All right, so as we can tell, sighted people can be ignorant, but we need to educate them. So how do we deal with their ignorance at times? So, you guys are here one of two ways. You guys are here, the first way, because you guys told a family member, a teacher, a mentor, you told someone that you couldn't see, the red marker on the board, right? So then that got you down the path of getting a TBI and accommodations, right? Or you were diagnosed at a young age of being blind or visually impaired, and your TBI wants you here to learn how to find your voice, So we're gonna learn how to find our voice. So I'm giving you guys 2 scenarios here. Did someone just speak? No? Okay. So I'm asking for some audience participation here. You guys are free to unmute. So for the first scenario here, very closely to my first reason why you guys may be here, is, you can't seem to see the red marker on the whiteboard, even though you are as close as possible. You are seated like right in front of that whiteboard and you can't see it. So what do you do?
Ellie, since a lot of these people are teachers, maybe they could throw out what one of their students have done or would do.
Yes, I would love that.
Told you, sometimes it's a rough crowd. Sometimes they need to warm up.
Well, let's start. Okay, we have someone?
Yeah, I think so.
Go ahead.
Shannon, did you have something?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I thought I was still muted. I was just going to say, you have to let somebody know, to let the teacher know.
Yes.
Or you have to communicate that to somebody.
I agree. Thank you. I also see in the chat that Susan said, take a pic with the iPad. That's a very good idea.
That's a good one. Another suggestion as a fellow TBI is to ask them to use a darker color. Just because you have the colors of the rainbow doesn't mean you have to use every color. And also using black is the best, but a dark blue would also work.
Mm-hmm. What I've personally have done in the past is I've had teachers print out the notes for me and have typed it out and sent it to me either through Google or have printed it out, like I said, and that has worked. Someone in the chat said you can use Seeing AI, which that's a very good one. So we can see with this first scenario, and of course there are always more options of what you can do, but our next scenario here, I don't want to get any TVIs mad, but maybe, this is a good talking point, So our next scenario. So we come into class, we are ready to learn and do this assignment today. Maybe it's a test, and our teacher forgot to accommodate us. But we can leave class to go to get it enlarged and miss out on that instructional time, or we can go to the math lab or the testing lab to go do it, or we can just say, okay, that's fine, and just work with that size 12 font for this assignment. But it's okay because the teacher said they'll fix it and they'll remember for the future. So TVIs and students, what do we do in this situation?
You have to keep reminding the teachers because they do forget.
Yes, that is very true.
And also as a TVI, educating the general ed population as far as general education teachers, we have to let them know that you're going to have students in your classroom that have an IEP, but they're general education. So there's a lot that goes with that. We have to educate not only their teachers, but the students, the community, and the staff on campus as well.
Yes, we do have to teach the teachers sometimes, which can be very hard. Especially if they've been teaching one way for 20 years and that's how they're going to do it, So
then you follow up with it's a low incidence. So it happens on occasion. It might only happen once in your career, but this is what needs to happen in order for a student to have equal access to all of the curriculum that's being offered to other sighted students.
Exactly.
Do they provide a sensitivity training? I mean, they give it to all these other entities, but not to teachers that.
I'm glad you brought that up. So in my experience as a TVI, one of my outstanding students is also joining us today. So I started with her when she was 8. And what I did was I started with educating her classmates, right? So around her birthday every year, we would do a presentation. And it also falls onto the TVI and the student themselves to educate. Every year, she would do something new. She would make bookmarks one year with their names in Braille. She would always show them what she uses as far as her technology. And she would show what her Braille writer is and how Braille works. She started a Braille club at her junior high school. So things like that. So we started small like that to introduce her classmates. And then it got to a point where she was introducing herself every year with an email. Now this next year, she's going into high school. We're doing an actual video presentation to show the teachers. And it started small, but we're educating. We take it upon ourselves to educate the general public, and including the teachers themselves, and get to know their librarian, to know what books you need for the next year, and being pleasantly persistent, but not backing down, making sure that they're educated and keep reminding them, and I'm going to get ahead of myself, but we'll go into the next option later. Another thing that the students can do.
Yeah. I think I know which student it is, and
a
student named Hermione has said to, we can remind them to let us know about the assignment sooner, and that's a really good one. But pleasantly persistent. Yep, I love that. A really great thing that I think a lot of people don't know about, which Annalisa taught me about it this year. She's just been my TVI for just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Her actual TVI is on maternity leave. So not only did I invite Ellie to a Tuesday tea with CSB, that actual day I was voluntold that we were actually doing her presentation. And I'm really excited that we did and had the opportunity to do it.
Yes, and through, talking to Annalisa, I have learned that you guys can call an IEP at any time. The student, you are the main person on the IEP. And, we're trying to be pleasantly persistent. I'm going to steal that forever now. But, if this is a continuous thing, then let's call a meeting, remind them, hey, teachers, it's in writing. You have to accommodate me. That's legally binding. So do it. And I could have called so many IEPs. Maybe that's why no one told me about it, because I've had so many teachers who have really have quote unquote forgotten to accommodate so many times. Of course, there's the few teachers who genuinely want to accommodate you and be their best, and they forget, and they're like, oh, I am so sorry. This will not happen again. And those are the best teachers, honestly, the ones who really care about you getting a proper education. But that's something that I never knew could be called. The student can call an IEP at any time. So if you guys don't take anything else from this, please take this one bit of information, because that is one thing that we can help do to really start advocating for ourselves. It really helps. But what also really helps with that is being open and honest with your TVI and all of your teachers for everything you need to succeed. And of course, one year I may need what's it called? The document camera that can look at the board and it shows up on my iPad. But I'm in middle school now, and I'm a big kid, and I'm starting to enter the awkward teenage years, So maybe I'm getting a little bit of cane shame because middle schoolers are mean at times, So not all middle schoolers are mean though. So, maybe I don't feel like I need that accommodation anymore. So telling your TVI and your teachers, hey, I don't want to really use this one anymore because I don't feel like I'm benefiting from it. But is there anything else out there that I could use? And, sometimes there are teachers who may use that as an excuse to not accommodate you anymore. So we need to be pleasantly persistent, tell them that they still need to accommodate us. We're just changing it a little bit. And maybe that can be a change to, an alert, a call for action to set up an IEP.
Your needs will change as you go through your school years and trying to find out what works for you. And so it's trial and error. The student that I'm talking about, she is here with us today, but has finally gotten to the point where she understands what's necessary, what's needed. And she's had 3 IEPs this year. She's called on her own, which I'm proud to say. So, but it got down to the point where she said, okay, these are the things I need, and these are going to grow with her into high school. Please let me know if you put something in her drive by the title of the item the night before. If there's any slide presentations you're doing in class, she wants to have them ahead of time, a day before at least, so she is right in real time with her classmates. She's also asked for asking for visual descriptions. That's one thing we'll work on with the staff for next year at the high school. But trial and error. She realized, okay, well, this isn't working. But then also if the teachers aren't accommodating, then we have the right, she has the right, I should say, to call that IEP meeting. And it's just touching base. It's not changing goals necessarily, but it can change if you need to add something to the IEP. I was also very, just as a TVI, make sure that there's accommodations, like if the student needs to have frequent visual breaks, if the student has gets headaches or something, has the right to have food or water in the classroom. And I explicitly have that written in an IEP under special factors to make sure that everything, there's not a question. These are necessary items that a student needs.
Yes, I
Can I add on to something you said, Ellie? You mentioned that when students get into that uncomfortable, awkward age in middle school, that sometimes they'll switch over to an iPad or something less, in their personal view, less obnoxious. And you said sometimes it's even more important for the team to host accommodations. And I think that's a good note to parents and teachers and students, that when you switch over to an iPad, when you've been using a video magnifier that takes up 3/4 of your desk, your gen ed teacher, it's not right in front of them all the time anymore, right? Like they don't notice every single moment of the day that you need accommodations. And so it becomes even more important to advocate for yourself, because your gen ed teacher will forget in the moment that you still need accommodations, and they might, who knows, they might be Googling one of your Google searches on, did this person's vision come back? Did they, what happened, right? Like, they might, it's not, when it's not front and center and in your face at that point, it's easier to let it slide by. I think you raised a good point of focusing on accommodations even heavier in those ages.
Yeah, no, I've gone through so many different types of accommodations, like the Topaz XL, the one that needs its own desk for your documents. Then I went to the iPad and the what's it called? The projector one that, you know, shows what's on the board. And then I went back to the iPad, and then I was like, oh, well, I can take pictures with my iPad, so it's fine. And then it became really blurry. So then I got a laptop, and I magically needed size 24 font. So yes, your needs do change with your maturity, or, you know, as you grow, because I was really into Wiggles as a little kid. Of course, I still love them, because who doesn't love the Wiggles? But
I love the Wiggles.
Now, I'm a big kid now. I just turned 18. I'm an adult, you guys. So, now I'm not as big as a fan of Wiggles. Of course, I'm back into the Wiggles because I have a niece who's 3 years old. So we have to do the Wiggles dance party. But as your hobbies and interests change when you grow. So of course, the accommodations that you need will change as you grow. So with that, I want to remind you guys, before we get into ways that we can accommodate, that you will not be a master advocate overnight. And, practice makes progress. So when I was a third grader, I was a little shy. I still loved talking to everyone and being everyone's friend. But when it came to talking to teachers, I was scared. They're people in charge. They're scary. So one day I couldn't read our textbook, and we had to look over to the whiteboard, and I could not see that red marker. So I quietly went up to the teacher and I said, excuse me, I can't see the board or the textbook. She said, oh, no problem. Let me go print out a larger copy for you, which best response ever. And she got me rolling on the IEP. She called my parents and reached out to the county to set up the testing for IEPs for visual services. And we got down that road. But 4th grade, I had a teacher who refused to accommodate me because she had to go out of her way to teach. And, my Topaz XL was just too large to be where I needed to sit in the class. So it was a really weird switch, but that is something I'm honestly thankful for to have in my younger years, to learn that people, they aren't always the nicest and won't want to accommodate you. So I had to really fight and find my voice that year. The teacher wouldn't even let me sit in the front of the class. So we had to fight and really show, hey, this is an IEP and this is what I need. If you're not going to let me have my Topaz up in the front of the class with me, then at least let me sit in the front of the class. Let me move during our notes time to the floor so I can at least see. And it was a terrible 4th grade year. No 4th grader should have to go through that. And if any of you guys else had any of those experiences, I'm really sorry. But it's definitely something you shouldn't have to go through, But I want to show you guys a little clip from my personal YouTube. Let me just make sure I'm sharing sound real quick. Can I adjust that from?
Yes, you go up to your view options, and then there's a ... and it's share computer sound. Ellie, that's quite a quote. I'm going to throw that into the chat, so everybody has that beyond your slide deck here. You're inspiring people.
Oh, thank you. Yes. So maybe you guys might know, or not, but I have a personal YouTube channel where I am an advocate for the blind and visually impaired, and I just kind of talk about my life. And throughout my life, my parents are great. They love advocating for me, But there's going to be a bit of a power struggle when you start to learn to find your voice, and you get a little bit annoyed when people are talking for you because they don't know what you see. So you're going to need to kind of push back against that. And maybe you'll have parents who are super easy about it, but I have a stubborn parent. So I'm going to show you guys this quick clip here and we can talk about it.
All right, families. So my first point, which is the most important one that you guys need to understand and please get into your heads, is that please let your family member who is disabled, like me, who's visually impaired, please let them advocate for themselves and talk about their disability themselves, because you might not have a disability, or if you have a disability, it may not be the same as theirs. So you don't know what it's like, you don't know what their vision is like. And while I love my dad, he likes to pretend that he knows exactly what my vision looks like and how it is with the nystagmus and visual snow and all that, when in reality, he doesn't have either. And when I try to advocate for myself and tell people my vision, he gets grumpy about that. I'm just trying to advocate for myself because one day, Dad, you're not gonna be there. And what will I do then when you've been advocating for me my whole life and now I'm by myself and I get nervous because I've never had to do this by myself. And, okay, disclaimer though, I'm very appreciative of my dad though, and that was not meant to yell at him, a little bit though, but it is very frustrating when someone asks you directly something and someone else tries to interrupt and explain something, because mansplaining kind of sucks. But I'm very appreciative that he tries to help, but just
calm down, parents.
Give your kids a chance to talk and let them express that, because if you don't, they're not going to open up to you anymore. So just give your kids space to let them talk. Okay? Okay.
All right, I was afraid it wasn't going to cut off. But, yes, in this video, you guys can always find the link to the longer one, but all right, families,
so my first point.
Yes, it's really important that I know we do have some parents in here that, you need to let your kid open up to you, but there's a fine line that you need to walk where you need to let them speak and of course encourage it. And if they don't feel comfortable just yet, help them out. But once they are starting to speak for themselves, please be supportive of that and continue to let them grow as a person. And of course, sometimes you are going to need that support from your TBI, from your teacher, from your parent, but you need to speak for yourself because only you know what your vision is like. And what little color spectrum you belong to. I belong to the green tier, and I want to hear what you guys belong to, and some stories of what you guys have gone through.
So there is a comment in the chat of an outstanding individual that I know personally. And she said, other people speak for ourselves makes her feel that that they're stealing her voice. You're not only speaking from what they know, but they don't know from what she knows. So the quote, it says, other people speak for ourselves makes me feel like they're stealing my voice. You're only speaking from what they know, but not from what we know.
Exactly. That I couldn't have said that better myself. And I feel like a lot of us here have gone through that, even on the smallest thing, someone ordering for you, which personally, I like talking. So
good job, Hermione.
Let me talk. And yes, thank you so much, Hermione. I'm so glad that you joined us here today. And that totally couldn't have been said better.
Mm-hmm. Are there any questions or comments that would like to be shared? Would love to hear from you.
Hi, yes, my name is Miguel.
Hi.
To share on that experience, so I'm legally blind. I work with a TVI, and he shares that with me all the time, or we have that experience a lot where they talk to him instead of me. And we always find that interesting.
And I defer it to the student. Ask the student. Yeah, that is
and that's what he tells him. He tells him, well, he's right there. Talk to him.
exactly. That's their accommodation, not mine, right? Agreed.
Yeah, I've in that YouTube video, I actually tell a story of how I went to the zoo with my family. And I was the person looking out for the gondolier since we were heading back down. It was raining. And so we were like, we need to go home now. We're getting cold. So I was looking out for the gondolier, and usually they'll be like, hey, we're ready for you. They just waved at me. And it's not even like a big, like, oh, come on over, like the big wave. It was the smallest hand gesture. I think it might have just been like their fingers being like, come here, instead of, you know, come on over, guys. Didn't speak at all. And, you know, my sister really helped out there, and she's like, hey, by the way, she's blind. So in the future, if you have a blind person or low vision, you don't know exactly what their vision is like. So please make sure to speak to them instead of trying to talk to the sighted people around them, since she was the one looking for you. And we were in our own little conversations here. My sister tried to get them to apologize. They never apologized, but I really appreciated how my sister did advocate for me in that situation. And of course, yes, families, please, you know, advocate for your family, but let them do it. I wanted to share that little snippet of how my sister advocated for me, because I honestly didn't really hear. I was like, oh, I'm so used to people not advocating, or, you know, people kind of, it's so sad, you know, people not accommodating you. That's the word. It was kind of like, oh, my sister's advocating for me because this person didn't accommodate me. Hermione said that her little cousins will do that for her. And that's cute. But were there any stories or questions that anyone wanted to say?
I have a question about your about the IEP itself, and recognizing this room has our biggest student number yet. Excited to have you all here, and if you want to have a
How
voice,
exciting.
yeah, if you guys want to have a voice and turn on your mic, please feel free to do so. But I know from since I've become an administrator, Ellie and Annalise, that I have a different perspective of the IEP itself. And I know that as a teacher, the IEP is stressful. It's stressful as a TVI. It's stressful as a gen ed classroom teacher. It's stressful. It's just simply a stressful space, especially when someone has called it because they're disgruntled, because they're frustrated. It's the check and balance of like, you're doing something wrong. I'm calling an IEP, darn it. And I'm curious if you have attempted, and if you got to that stage, if you try to just call meetings before the IEP, and if not, do you think that calling a meeting might have a similar impact, or could be as powerful as calling an IEP?
For my experience, I'm also an itinerant TVI, so trying to get meetings is a little more difficult. When you call an IEP, that's more an official meeting where people really do have to show up. So that's kind of like a guarantee. Although during the year, there's open communication between myself as a liaison for the student. But I also get my students to the point where I'm hoping that they'll advocate for themselves. So just say, oh, by the way, would you mind doing this, doing that? And just touching base. And it could be called an IEP, but not necessarily changing anything, but having that open conversation. It's nice. So now, for instance, if I can say Hermione, she's here with us. She said that she needed docs put in a certain place, in a certain format, Arial font 40 point. So now they know this is exactly what she needs for her to quickly access something. She can zoom in when she needs to. We're going to work on that next year to find out how we're going to work with the magnifier in class. Since it's been so nice being distance with COVID, it's been nice she can do everything from home. It's going to be a little bit more challenging once we're back in the classroom, but we'll work on that and call the meetings as necessary.
Mm-hmm. As a student, I am a very theatrical person, so I decided to take choir, and I was luckily put into a higher choir called Women's Ensemble, and we were doing a 12-piece set, and it's a very famous set. And I asked the teacher multiple times, hey, can you give me a heads up whenever we're getting a new piece of music so you can get it enlarged, or I can go talk to my TVI or talk to the textbook room to have them enlarge it for me so we can scan it and put it onto my iPad so I can enlarge it from there. And he's like, yeah, sure. Well, he surprises us with our 12-piece repertoire one day, and I don't have it enlarged. I didn't know we were getting our repertoire that day. So I was already kind of mad because he started teaching everyone a song that I never fully grasped because I had to go to the textbook room and wait for an hour and a half to get it enlarged.
That's really frustrating because I've also introduced, another thing, so if your students have low vision and want to participate in music, choir, for instance, I was telling Ellie that I said, well, you can call the music publisher directly and ask them for an accessible copy of music. I don't know if people know that, but you can do that. I worked for a music publishing company right out of college. So knowing that, just call them and find out. And so that really, I met Ellie during my internship for O&M, and then full circle, I have her now as her TVI. But I was really sad to find out that the teacher didn't take it upon themselves to really reach for that and get what she needed. That was something really frustrating to me.
Mm-hmm. And I talked to my then TVI Maddie and Annalise. I was like, guys, the teacher, he didn't tell me that we were going to do this, and now I have to enlarge it, but the scanning wasn't scanned properly, and it's really hard for me to see, and all of this. So they're like, oh yeah, we'll contact the textbook company. So they call the textbook company and get the teacher connected to the textbook company, or not the textbook, the music company, and it never arrived. The teacher just dropped the ball, and I asked him multiple times, hey, where's the music? Is there any update on it? He's like, oh, well, now it's out of my hands. It's all on the textbook company. It's out of my hands. Sorry, guys. Sorry.
I'm sorry. As a TVI, that is not an acceptable answer. I would call myself. That's one thing too. I advocating for my students in that way, especially, you have to be pleasantly persistent, but then you have to also take the reins and say, look, this has to be provided for my student, and really move mountains if you have to, and at least try to make that attempt, right?
Yeah.
It's super important to have equal access for all of our kids.
Yeah, and it's so hard, especially because I'm very scared of male authoritarian figures. So I'm absolutely terrified. I go up to him and I'm like, do you happen to have that a copy now, sir? Please. So it was a really hard situation for me, and I remember after Annalise had finished her training with Maddie that I tried calling a few meetings with Maddie and the teacher, and they just never really worked out. But at the time, I didn't know that you could call an IEP meeting at any time as a student. So I feel in that situation, an IEP meeting would have been a more suitable option.
Got it.
And there's another comment from Hermione. It says, it is so easy for people to say yes or it's fine, but they don't know how it feels not to have things accessible.
Yes.
That's true. And then Lulu said sometimes family wants to speak for her, speak for me, she said, or he said, sorry. Lulu, I'm not sure if I can't see the person. Sometimes my family wants to speak for me, but I tell them that they want to speak for themselves.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if anyone here knows of the YouTuber Molly Burke. She is a blind YouTuber. She is a great influencer, and I encourage a lot of students here, even the TVIs who like and family members, to watch her, because she does talk about what it's like being a blind woman. And she had told a story of how, if she's at a restaurant and she asks the waiter for a Braille menu, that at that point, she's able to accommodate herself and advocate and say, hey, I'd like to order this and this. But when there is no updated Braille menu or large print menu, or they just don't even have one, then at that point, she's considered disabled because she's not able to order herself, and she has to rely on either her mom or the waiter to tell them what's on the menu. And it was something that like really stood out to me, because if she's able to have that easy, like the accessible accommodations, then she's not disabled because she's able to order and read it herself. And someone just wrote in the chat, yes. I'm guessing that was to the Molly Burke.
I'm curious. I have a question for you, Annalisa. There's a lot of opportunities that TVIs get that are difficult. There's these self-advocacy opportunities where a teacher just comes through you because it's easier to talk to the teacher. They have a district email account. They want an answer by tomorrow and it's already 5 p.m. And so district teachers, gen ed teachers will ask the TVI a question that they should have directed at the student. Sometimes a gen ed teacher will ask a TVI and say, hey, this student is not turning in their assignments this week, or they didn't understand algebra. What are you going to do about it? And as a TVI, we're like, I don't know, tell the kid that fail them on the class. Like, don't give them a grade. How do you, as a teacher who's consciously thinking about self-advocacy all of the time, how do you deal with those situations where a gen ed teacher comes to you with a question that should have been directed at the kid, but it wasn't? It's now in your lap, and there's no intention of it getting to the kid.
Well, that's a loaded question. There's different ways depending on the student, depending on the circumstance. But what I try to do is say, have a meeting with the student, or try to redirect. I try to redirect to have it addressed to the student. If that's something that doesn't happen and I find out from the student that it doesn't happen, which can happen, then I'll step in and talk to the teacher and say, find out what it is. What is, then I'll flip it and say, is the material accessible? Are the accommodations being met? And in a very nice way, but again, being pleasantly persistent with them and educating them, really taking that opportunity and saying, this is part of it, that the student can speak for themselves. Ask them to reach out to the student. If they don't, then I can step in. But then also ask if everything's being met for that student to be successful as far as the accommodations or as far as access to the material.
I heard one of the things I heard you say is that you end up going back to the student if the teacher doesn't go to them directly. And I think just that knowledge play for a student to realize that there's this adulting that's happening behind their back is an important avenue to learning self-advocacy, right? If we don't tell our kids, hey, there's all these adults talking about you constantly, daily, they don't recognize how much support is going into their day-to-day life. And so we have to be very transparent with, okay, your math teacher keeps checking in every single day about your assignments. Can you start dealing with that?
Right. And let them know, that they have to be held accountable. Then I ask my student, okay, well, what is it that's making it difficult? What can we do to flip it around to make it a little bit easier for you, right? If it's a whiteboard with dry erase markers, or if it's whatever it might be, flipping the contrast on an iPad and, using an Apple Pen or whatever, then we'll make that happen. We just have to find out what the kids need, or the students need. And it's really important to include them in their lesson planning, include them in their academic success, because it's their success, right? It's not my success. I want to teach myself out of a job. So if there's a problem, I want the kids to say, okay, well, let's talk about it. I have students that need to email a teacher. Well, we talk about it. We'll meet on Zoom anytime. I'm available to help the students. So they can say, hey, what should I do? This is the problem. How do I word this? Or how do I word that? So I have the student actually send the email, and we work on the verbiage together and what's actually going to be put in the body of the email and who they're going to contact. Okay, so my science teacher, I need to have this information. Okay, let's talk about it. So what do we need to do? With aides also, you need to have a strong aide too. And that's another whole other discussion. But having that mini team to assist a student daily is important. It's also showing them how to advocate for themselves, how to take care of situations as they arise, right? But you want to empower your students to do that, to actually tackle it right away. Okay, this didn't happen. Why didn't it happen? Okay, it didn't happen, but this is what needs to happen. And let's say, okay, let's be very kind about it in an email. Hello, how are you? Hope all is well. Would you mind doing this? And being rather than be confrontational in an email. Does that make sense? To really, really talk to the students and ask what they need, and then working on the way to properly put an email together and have them send it, and they can CC me if they want, but it's direct communication between the students and the teachers.
That formatting and professionalism and politeness is a chance to, it's frustrating, right? I'm assuming the student's going to get fired up in the moment. And as I just saw Hermione say in the chat, speak up, but be polite. It's very important. If not, because they might take it the wrong way. That's an opportunity for teachers to instill that with our kids. Yeah. I have more questions if nobody else is chiming in.
I'd like to bring up a point I forgot to bring up earlier, and kind of finding your voice. It was something that's really important to me, that it helped boost my confidence and my individuality, and it really inspired me to speak up for myself, is going to any of the workshops with CSB, as a lot of you guys are doing here. Go to Lighthouse for the Blind and join the youth programs. We have the Not So Bored Game Night, the audio description movie club. Go to Enchanted Hills Camp for the Blind and Visually Impaired. Go to Bloomfield. Oh wait, Bloomfield, I don't think that's a camp anymore. Go, be involved in the community, because you get to meet other people who are visually impaired like you, and your vision does not define you at that moment. It's just who you are as a person. So you don't really have to say, hey, I need these accommodations. And you're just like, hey, I'm Ellie, and this is what I like to do. And you're blind too, so what's your name,
And I can't stress enough, along those lines with Ellie, just to piggyback on that, is the short courses at CSB. Those are always great to do. And the short courses give the student an opportunity, when post-COVID or in pre-COVID, actually being on campus for a week. It gives them that community. And also really encourage your students. It's been kind of nice, to be honest with you, with learning from a distance, because I can include students depending, because I'm in different places, they have different schedules, but they can cross over, and I can have them together in a Zoom meeting and introduce them and say, okay, now we're going to say, oh, you can help each other out, and build that. In college and graduate school at San Francisco State University, there's a quote that we use called the virtual water cooler. Dr. Ting Su coined that phrase for us as graduate students. And it's really having that community, that virtual community available for the students to actually find their people, right? To make sure that they have that connection. And short courses, Enchanted Hills, Lighthouse for the Blind, any opportunity for them to be with their peers is incredibly important.
I agree. I've noticed you guys. Aria, did you have something you wanted to say or add or ask?
I do, but I just feel like this is such an awesome experience right now, but my questions are so weighted, and it's overwhelming. It's overwhelmingly good to be here, but it's overwhelmingly sad at the same time, because my daughter's 12 and I have a 3-year-old. They both have the same disability of optic nerve atrophy, and I'm having to advocate for both. So I'm kind of overwhelmed with that, because I have multiple IEPs coming up right now, and I have so many questions, but I don't know how to ask the right one right now, because
please reach out.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I want, because she hasn't found her voice yet, and I know she will.
She will.
She doesn't have one yet, but I know that he'll get one. But I just want, it's hard right now because we can't get the school to understand the importance of accommodating for her, and how she unnecessarily and didn't need to, but she's regressed for the past 3 years, because they've kind of just had her be the cute little girl that likes to sing and loves everyone and gives everyone hugs in the corner in the classroom kind of thing. And she's missed out on education for 3 years. And, the blessing and curse of COVID is that I've gotten to see that. So now I am advocating strongly for her. But even though I know it's not too late, I feel like it's too late because she's now learning what the preschooler has to learn for education. And she's in 6th grade, quote unquote. And I just don't, that's why I said it's a lot, because I don't want her, the potential that I see and everyone else in her community can see, the school's not seeing because she's not performing for their tests and their assessments and things like that. But it's like, you guys have never accommodated anything for her, regardless of the IEPs we've had and me saying she needs to learn Braille. They've said, well, no, she doesn't. She can see. I'm like, no, she can't. Please give her Braille. So now, you know, she's finally, I'm sorry. I don't want to take up everyone's time.
No. This is important.
Story, but I know that I'm on the path to helping them both, but at the same time, I don't know what accommodations they can truly have. I mean, we have the CCTV machine, and thank God mom drinks coffee and it makes her brain go fast. So I can think, oh, we need to magnify things. So we, you know, on my own, I've put her computer onto her TV in her room to magnify things for her. But it's like, these are common sense things that you guys as the professionals in her class at her school should have been thinking of. Why now in distance learning, I'm trying and erroring things, and you guys have just left it as the, well, these are what her scores say, this is what her tests say, so we're just gonna, I call it hospice, like she's on educational hospice. We'll keep her entertained, we'll keep her happy, and you know, we'll pass her on to the next grade. And it's not right. It's just not right.
One of the neat things about COVID from a parent's perspective is, as teachers, we have had to post publicly our resources for each other, right? And so there's been more transparency for you as a parent to understand the assessments. And so part of advocacy as a parent's perspective and later as a student's perspective is to know what assessments to ask for and to know what they do and what they mean. So what is a functional vision assessment? What is a functional vision assessment for a kid who has a little bit of vision, but not enough to access materials? What is it for a kid who has very little vision? What is a learning media assessment, and how do those jive together? What is a technology assessment, and why is it so hard for TVIs? Because it is. Some of those materials are available, but there are also things that, as Ellie and Annalisa were saying, that you can have in conversation with your district. And if it takes calling an IEP to make that conversation happen, you can do that. But you can as a parent say, educate me. I need to know what questions to ask. What are you doing? What assessments are you doing on my daughter? Can you walk me through your results? I don't fully understand that. Here are the problems I see at home. You have so much more vision of your kid than you had in the past, right? You got to be with her all the time, for better or worse.
But even as a teacher and as a mommy too, you know, I have 3 kids of my own, and you know your child best. You're the best assessor of that child. So share your insights, because they don't see those glimpses that you see. So you're a huge part of the team. You're advocating for your children, and we need to know that as professionals as well. You need to bring that to the table. You need to align yourself with your TVI and O&M if that's something that's being done or considered. You know, we're there to help our students. We want them to succeed, and with students come families, and we help everybody. We want to do that, right? Because we want them to be the most successful that they can be as an individual, because there's no way, sighted or otherwise, you don't lump kids in the same category ever. They're all individual. They have all individual strengths, and those are what we have to encourage and foster.
I'm curious, Annalisa and Ellie, based on something Arya said, there's a common phrase in our field called B is for blind. And it's a sad statement of truth that oftentimes a gen ed teacher doesn't understand a student where they're at. They are confused about whether their visual impairment is a statement about their cognitive capacity, and they're worried that them doing bad on a spelling test or a history exam or math problems, it's really about their blindness, and I feel so bad for them. They do so good. They try so hard. I'll give them a B. And I think I've joked in classes I've taught over the years, it actually usually is an A. It's not even a B. Often it's a full-fledged great grade. And I'm curious how you address that, Annalisa and Ellie, if you've ever noticed, if that happened to you, if you ever got a passing grade on something and you were like, wait, the what? And how you dealt with it.
From my experience, I meet the student at where their achievement level is. And so we go from that. In fact, I have a student that's in a particular district who is completely blind, no light perception, and we have to find out where she is. And I had to fight to put her in the right placement for math. So we're working on it. We're working step by step, meeting her where she is. She's being graded for what she knows, not what along with the particular 7th grade standards. We are modifying it slightly, but we're reaching those goals. It's taking a while, but that's okay. Practice makes progress. We're in forward motion, and it takes time. And that road is never straight. It's never from point A to point B. You're going to curve around. But I tell all my kids that you have a goal, and as long as you're reaching towards that goal, it doesn't really matter what road that is, right? Or where that road, those turns are going to take. You're staying on that road regardless. Another silly analogy I use is that train's in motion. You just keep going, and it's going to take you to your destination.
Yeah. I don't know if this is technically if it falls under the same thing, but I've had points deducted because of my vision. In choir, we would have to sight read.
Which should have been enlarged for you, but that's yes. She's gonna round me up again.
Right. And obviously I have a visual impairment, but including my nystagmus, where my eyes are shaking, it's really hard to focus on the 5 lines with the dots on them, and it's hard to tell if it's a half note or a quarter note or an 8th note. And so it's really hard for me to sight read, and I've gotten points deducted for that, and I've tried to go to the teacher and say, hey, can I be excused from this activity because it's hard for me to because of my vision, and it's visually straining. And they say, no, just do your best, and I'll give you a good score, quote unquote. And a B is a good score, but I'm a straight A student, and so a B is an F to me. But I've gotten as low as a D on sight reading.
Ellie, I'm curious. So before this session, you guys, I met with Ellie and Annalisa, and Ellie walked me through her visual impairment in as articulate of a way as I have ever heard a person, let alone a student, walk through their own visual impairment. And I'm curious, how did you get there? Were those TVIs that instructed you? Was that your mom and dad? Was that doctors? Was that yourself? How did you get to a point of understanding what you see and being able to articulate it?
That is a really good question, because from a young age, I've been encouraged to ask questions when I don't fully understand anything, because, there's the common phrase where there's no such thing as a stupid question. And I really do stand by that, because if you're having a hard time understanding something, or if you're having a hard time seeing something, ask your doctor, hey, why do I see little floating dots moving left and right like it's snowing? Oh, well, you may have visual snow. And I've always asked those questions, and I've had such a great support system with my family, and they've also asked those questions for me, and they've explained what optic nerve hyperplasia is to me, the underdevelopment of the optic nerve. They've explained to me what a nystagmus is and why it has such a big impact on the way I see, and why it's so hard for me to read things. And at points I've even had to ask teachers, hey, why is it easier for me to read size 24 font than it is 12? And I really am such a strong believer in educating yourself as much as you can, because you won't know what's out there for you if you don't do the research. And I wouldn't have found Lighthouse for the Blind, CSB, Enchanted Hills Camp. I wouldn't be here if I didn't tell my teacher in the 3rd grade, hey, I can't see this. And I feel like visual impairment's a little bit more common, because I have people who they have a hard time seeing things. My best friend didn't know she needed glasses until her freshman year, because she thought that's how people could see, So it's really asking and just absorbing all that information you can. And once you get used to it, you're happy to talk about it,
Yeah, I really appreciate your insight. I think if I saw anything happen today, it was how important just talking about visual impairment is, to have an open dialogue and create safe space for conversation for our students. And some of that is generated by us as teachers and parents, opening that dialogue with our students and making them feel safe, as you just said, Ellie, to ask any question, and to be able to openly repeat those questions again and again. And I think sometimes as parents and teachers, until our kids are able to articulate, their questions might jive. They might ask you a question one day or 1 week or 1 year that contradicts itself later. And that could be them exploring how to they are seeing, because it's their normal. And they're trying to compare it against something that they don't have. And in order for us to understand them, we're comparing low vision to 2020, or to our own vision, right? And we need to let them find their voice. I really, truly appreciate both of you coming on today.
Our pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Glad everybody is on. If somebody has a burning question, you can stay on for a moment, but we are going to end this formally. And next week we have a similar strain. We have a topic for teachers out there. I know that some of you get a kid with albinism on your caseload, and you think that you have seen it all before. And somewhere along the line, you typically realize, oh crud, back to best practices. Individualization is always key. And so we have Kathy Garza from the Outreach Department at the Texas School for the Blind, who has albinism herself. But she's going to talk about best practices and how to deal with kids with albinism, and talk about the resources to both students and teachers and parents that NOAA, the National Organization for Albinism and Hypopigmentation, has available to everybody. And it should be another fantastic opportunity to really continue to dive into this self-advocacy thread, and really for us as professionals to understand all these kids on our caseload that we come in contact with, and further understand and appreciate individualization. All of this stuff will be available on our YouTube site, including our slideshow, and we'll go through the chat in case there was any resources directly linked or commented on, that we'll try to put those links in the YouTube description as well. And I'm happy to hang out as well afterwards if there's any questions. Thank you.